Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christina, and I'm here to welcome you to our webinar, Three Simple Things Professionals Need to Practice to Stay Safe Online, hosted by Summit IT Services and NorthStar Technology Services. So whether you're the head honcho of a massive company or the average computer users, these practices we're suggesting are things everybody should use to help secure their professional and personal data. Today, we're lucky enough to have a panel of very knowledgeable IT professionals who have decades of experience in the realm. These gentlemen will be talking about their personal experience with data breaches and the ways they would have prevented them from happening in the first place. I want to introduce you to our panelists today. We have Jeff Jackson from Summit IT Services, Eric Williams from NorthStar Technology Services, and special guest Charles Henson from Nashville Computer. So we're going to take a quick minute to have our panelists introduce themselves and speak a little bit about their experience in the IT realm.
Charles, which continent have you not been to?
I haven't been to like Antarctica. Just
okay.
Not been there.
That'll be easy from Tennessee.
It should be.
Well, thanks guys for introducing yourselves. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about a few things. Just wanted to provide a little bit of statistics for you. Did you know that 2 out of 3 people of internet users actually can't identify a phishing email from a regular email? Data breaches due to password security accounts, there's a total of 80% of data breaches. And then companies lose 47% more money from a data breach than those that who don't keep their software updated. So today we're going to be talking about, password security, identifying phishing emails, and these gentlemen are going to be bringing up their personal experience, what happens during these, and tools that they can use to protect themselves. So who wants to start about the phishing statistics and their personal experience?
I can chime in on that. I'll say one of the first, the numbers, if anybody follows this kind of stuff, I mean, not everybody's in this industry, but it's hard to not get inundated with security breaches that happen all the time. Most of the breaches start with an email, and that's a phishing email, right? Somebody asks you for some credentials, inadvertently your Amazon package didn't get shipped, log in here, that kind of stuff. And from a corporate level, that actually it can compromise the whole business. My first recollection of I'll say an account that was hacked was actually in an old office almost 7 or so years ago. Our company was in the back of a title company's office, a real estate title company, and they had about 10 people, and they did all kinds of, I'll say mostly residential transactions, but also some corporate stuff or business lease buildings and stuff. So I'll say it was right around this time of year. It was Thanksgiving, and the agent got fired in the long run. But when you look at what happened back then, there wasn't the CRM tools or the I'll say company sharing of document tools that are out there today that they use. So if you were going to buy a house or sell a house, you got tied to an email chain with almost potentially 9 people, a buyer, seller, 2 people often in that, I'll say in the buyer side, 2 people in the seller side, 2 attorneys, a title clerk, and potentially 2 real estate agents. So every little detail, hey, we got the smoke detector certification. Hey, 7 other people get that email. Out of this event, or this incident, you would call it, somebody's email was hacked, and the closing was scheduled for Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And it was later in the day. It turns out it was a dry closing, which I found out bought and sold a couple of houses. So basically no money gets transacted till after the closing's done. So nobody walks away with a check. Everything was going to get wired later once the bank package and all those things got completed. And I'll never forget, the title clerk was let go 3 days later, after Thanksgiving actually, and or the next week. But she distinctly remembers, she goes, the closing was great. Everybody was sharing, sending emails back and forth. Thanks. It was great seeing you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving. And, Wednesday, 3:30, 4 o'clock, she's thinking, I got to get, turkey in the oven. I've got to get the house prepped for our family. And she sent an email, as soon as the package arrives, I'll get the money out. And don't you know, an email came back from the seller saying it was great to see you. Really loved the, thing. Thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. Hey, could you change the wiring instructions to this account? Because we want to, buy something else upstate. And she did. And she got the package 15 minutes later, and then actually wired the money to the wrong spot. And $60,000 went out the door that quick. And the email looked just like a real email. So somebody had been in that chain of emails for weeks, and if not months, and knew exactly what to say, when to say it, who was going to be, I'll say, at risk, because they weren't necessarily, they had other things on their mind. So, and like I said, she do insurance policies and stuff. She actually didn't follow their protocol where they were supposed to verbally authorize any wiring instructions, but she was like, look, I'll call them in the car. I really got to get home. So the sophistication back then, isn't what it is today. And I'll tap on some, the tools that you can get today far outweigh the tools that existed back then, but it does come down to human intervention. And there was nothing helping her say, hey, this is an email that doesn't look like the others. It should have a red banner across it saying this email, even though it says it came from Bob and Sue Thomas, it's really not from Bob and Sue Thomas. So it's got to be fake. I need to call somebody and help that out. So again, she wasn't necessarily phished, but somebody in that chain was phished. And the results ended up her losing her job. Insurance covered the $60,000 wire, but what a mess to have on a Thanksgiving Day weekend. And she, like, being in that office, we got to talk to her. She was crying. She's like, I can't believe it. I knew as soon as I sent it, I shouldn't have hit enter. I should have called right away, but I just didn't. And today, I'll say the environment's changed around us, because phishing and spam and all kinds of junk just happen at an exponentially higher rate. But the tools have kept up as well. And in my bio there, I mentioned that I do fly airplanes, and I would relate it to flying, back in the Wright brothers' day. They waited for a sunny day. They waited for the right winds. They had a plane with no instruments inside. Today, people fly in rain, somewhat snow, ice, whatever, and the instrument panel in a plane has changed dramatically. So as a user of computers, as a small takeaway is, we want to, as our MSP, we want to provide end users with the right tools for the environment they're in today versus, even 7, 10, 15 years ago. But we can talk about that later offline, but, the stats are one thing, and they just keep increasing. But when it comes home to a person that you work with for, a couple of years, and all of a sudden they're getting let go because of a simple click of the button, a keyboard button, it hits home.
Yeah, Eric, one of the key things that you keyed in on there was, somebody's email was compromised. And that's really the thing that we have to look at. And how was that email compromised? And what I would like to point out is someone in that chain probably was phished and sent a link. And that link said, hey, to see this attachment, I need you to log into your Microsoft Office 365 account. And that's where they put in their credentials. If you get that kind of a link and a pop-up, immediately stop, don't key in your password, and call your IT department, call your managed service provider, whomever's taking care of your IT, call the office manager and say, hey, look, this is asking for this. Should I type in my password? Because typically to open an attachment or open a link, you're not going to have to type in your password. The other key thing there that I'd like to point out is there's a simple step that we educate clients on from a wiring instruction standpoint. And that's simply, we're going to send you wiring instructions, but we're going to leave 3 to 5 digits out of the routing or the account number. When you get ready to wire those funds, call us. This is the direct line to call us, get in touch with us, and we're going to tell you the missing numbers based on the numbers that you give us. And by doing that one simple thing of just leaving a few characters out and making sure that you communicate with the other party that's going to be doing the wiring, you let them know ahead of time, hey, if you get wire instructions and it has the accounting, the account number and the routing instructions in it, that is not from me. I want
Right.
you to know that I'm always going to leave 3 to 5 digits out, and you can change it up. It can be 3, 4, 5 digits that you leave out. They have to call and get those missing digits so that the wire transfer can actually be processed.
Is that industry specific for you guys when you got that, or do you put that into company policies? I mean, I guess anybody can wire money, so yeah.
Anybody that wires money, we do it in our
Mhm.
cyber presentations when we're educating clients. We're telling them, ways to stay safe.
Okay.
If you get something, if you get an email and it invokes fear or urgency,
Yeah.
or it's asking for personal identifiable information, PII, like, hey, I need, and we literally had this happen. Hey, I need the social security number, the addresses, and the W-2s of all the employees so we can run a background check. And literally one of the employees flagged it and said, this looks like it came from the owner of the company, but it didn't. And Gaylord Opryland actually had that W-2 scam email probably about 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, and they sent every executive's W-2 to the scammers. So if they're asking for something, if it's too good to be true, if they're asking for it in urgency, if it's personal identifiable information, something about the employees, or they say, hey, can you go run and grab me some gift cards and make these purchases real quick? Those are all flags to say, you know what, let me pick up the phone and call and verify that this is actually a legit request.
All good. Oops, go ahead.
I was saying, and you guys encourage that, I'm sure, just thinking that through, not only from certainly from a corporate perspective that you where you're involved with those clients, those companies, but that carries over to my Gmail account. I don't have an AOL, but if I have those old things, you can push that through to, hey, if you're going to wire money from a bank to buy a house, can you get the same process? I guess you can ask for it.
You can, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So, Eric was talking about tools, and Charles was talking about a little bit of policy. I mean, there have always been con artists in the world. Back in the day, we didn't have tools. They had shtick to convince people to give their money over freely. So the tools have progressed significantly in the years, and with all the tools in the world, you got email encryption, you got email spam protection. The con artists or the cyber criminals are going to continue to find ways around it. So we have to stay up to speed with technique and hopefully one step ahead. Eric's story about wiring money to a fraudulent account is not unique. We've had instances where the hacked email account, same thing. This company in particular had a PDF form they had been regularly sending via email with their bank account routing numbers on it and signed. So no technology is going to fix that. That's a policy, just like Charles's policy about not including the entire account number in the wiring instructions. So the policy that could have saved this company, and this is at the tunes of millions of dollars, is don't use a PDF with your signature on it with all your wiring information in your email account, because if your email account gets hacked, that information is available to the hacker and all the history and all of your contacts. In this one instance, it took us a couple of days. This was a new customer for us. It took a couple of days to figure out what happened, and someone was in the account. Once we locked them out of the account, this is how crafty these con artists, cyber criminals are. They went and created a domain name with one character difference than the original domain name of the company. So they actually went and created a hosting account, created a Microsoft 365 account, and continued using that PDF to have money wired to them using that signed PDF. So the con artists out there, they're always coming up with new ideas on how to take your money. So speaking of tools, everybody's heard of multi-factor authentication. Banks have been using it forever. You get a text message on your cell phone. You use an authenticator app like Google Authenticator. Cracking passwords is a art, is a science. It's just a matter of time before you can crack a password. So what do you have to protect your accounts, whether it's a bank account or health records or your email or Facebook or whatever it may be? You got a username, you have a password, and if you don't have a third thing, something that you have, a cell phone, for example, you're really kind of leaving yourself out there for exposure. So with multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, there's many ways to do it. It's really the only way to secure an account. Now, having said that, there's still ways people can get in, but that is an essential. So the cell phone is the most common. Either get a text message or use an authenticator app. But that doesn't relinquish the idea of having a secure password. So a lot of us use something we know, something that's easy to remember. And if you use that same password on multiple accounts, once someone's hacked one account, they can easily hack another. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but personally, I probably have about 50 accounts I need to remember passwords for. So if I'm using the same password in all 50, they get into one, they got the others. So really these days, a password manager, password keeper is the way to go. Now, a password manager can reside on your cell phone. It can sit on your computer. But the beauty of it is it will generate a random password. Now, with a password manager on your cell phone, you can log into your bank account and cut and paste or automatically apply the username and password. You don't even need to know what the password is. It's randomly generated, it's pasted, copy and pasted, and then you put in your MFA code. The password manager will also let you create a unique password. It will generate them for you. Unique password for every site you log into. So with another short story besides the hacked email account with the wiring instructions is remote access. This is another customer that contacted us because this person noticed that their parents, they managed their parents' finances, parents' bank account was emptied. And the reason the bank account was emptied is because they had remote access to their computer, not protected by multi-factor authentication. Someone got into the computer, and on their computer, they had an Excel spreadsheet called Secrets. And in that Excel spreadsheet called Secrets were all of the usernames and passwords. So they got access to the bank account, credit card numbers, social security numbers. They had a field day. And if they had multi-factor authentication on that remote access connection, that would have been prevented. So if you don't have multi-factor authentication, I don't know of any account nowadays that does not. If you have a Gmail account, if you have a Yahoo account, all banks have required it for a very long time. All insurance companies require it. There are some that still don't require it. That's becoming fewer and fewer. If you know of an account that you have personal information in, I would ask the vendor of that account whether they have multi-factor authentication. And one last thing is, it's so easy to go to, especially in shopping. I want to buy this, I go and create an account. I want to buy that, I go create another account. Next thing you know, you got 100 accounts. Less is more. Keep fewer accounts because you wouldn't realize until you were a hacker how much information you're giving away by creating these accounts. You got usernames, email addresses, passwords, addresses, phone numbers, credit card numbers. It's just a proliferation of this data, and the best way to keep your data private to you is by keeping fewer and fewer accounts. And you need, keeping it simple, less is more.
Jeff, one of the things that you think about is we typically will use bad password hygiene, meaning that we'll reuse the same passwords over and over. We create an account on Amazon, then we create it for Gmail, then we create it for our bank, and then we create it for all these various sites, and we use the same password. And the issue with that is if one password is compromised and it's on the dark web, for sale, because that company didn't protect it, like LinkedIn, if your LinkedIn password was leaked or your Twitter password was leaked, and that's the same password you're using across the board, then, you're going to have your password known by the bad guys. And that's where these password managers really come in handy, because you can practice great password hygiene by having a different unique password for every single site that you ever log into. You never use the same password twice. And if that password should ever get compromised, you go change it in one place, just that site. And so adding on to that multi-factor authentication, there was a case where a person's Gmail account was compromised. That Gmail account password does what for Google Authenticator? It authenticates. So if you're using the same password on all your accounts and somebody gets your Gmail account and you're using the Google Authenticator, then they have access to your 2FA. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Make sure that you get a password app, Bitwarden, LastPass, 1Password. There's a few different ones out there. There's some that are free, some that are paid for subscription. Pay for the subscription so you can have it on your mobile device and your computer. These things are inexpensive. LastPass recently had an incident, but nothing happened within the passwords because they are all encrypted. And so I continue to tell people, look, remember the 1Password it takes to get into your authentication app, and then it will remember all the other passwords on your behalf.
The other thing on that too, Charles, I forgot to mention is that computers make it very easy for you to do things, including Google, Firefox, saving passwords in your browser. That is probably the biggest single mistake I see people make. If I have access to your computer, I have keys to the kingdom. And then you're sharing that if you've got your phone synchronized with your computer at work with your Google account, and you're using Chrome. Firefox is the same thing. It makes it easy to have those passwords in the browser. Most password managers allow you to save a URL. For example, when I use Password Manager, I have no favorites saved in the browser because they're all in my Password Manager. So yeah, no passwords in Chrome and your browser, whatever browser you may use, is not a good idea. Get a Password Manager.
So I've got 3 password managers just so we try them all out. You got a fun part about tech. But most recently, I've actually gotten pop-ups saying I forget what site, but that they'll warn me that my password on that site has been breached. So change it. And I've got a list of like 5 that they recommend changes. So it's almost more. Not only is it a browser shortcut tool that transfers to whatever computer I load it on, it gives me the ability to have only a couple memorized passwords as a master password, and then 2 is it gives me long complex passwords that could be unique on each and every site. Yeah, so I don't know, and again, they're $30 a year. I'm going to guess. I think we have a family plan for one of them, and I think that's $55, and I get like the kids on them, my wife on them, and it really it's good. It does a lot more than it. Again, the technology's changed, the landscape's changed, so the tool set that we have to use changes along with it. And the good news is it's not terribly expensive.
Yeah, and the good thing with that, Eric, is also that you think about it. Even if you have 3, I'd recommend you have 2. I have 2 separate ones. One's for business, one's for personal. So if anybody, at the office needs to take over that, if something, were to happen to me, whatever, even my personal, I have backup people that have login access to that. You can configure that within the software, because when you think about it, you never know what's going to happen. And so you need to make sure that those are accessible by someone that you highly trust and work with. And, you don't, like Jeff said, you don't want to save your passwords in your browser. And let's look at it from this standpoint. This is a home computer. It's old, it's aging. And I want to start talking a little bit about, aging hardware, because as we've used a computer for years and years and years, we're very comfortable with it. It's got Windows 7 on it. Maybe it's my home computer and I want to get into the office computer from that computer. What we're doing is we're opening up a vulnerability, a weakness there. When Windows 7 was end of life, then what happened was a lot of these devices started getting compromised because Microsoft stopped doing patches. They stopped doing remediation. And in one case, we had a prospect call us up. It was a warehouse down in Dixon. They had ransomware. And what we found out was they got ransomware through an old device in the manufacturing plant. And so because the machine wasn't getting updated, wasn't getting patched, the threat actors were able to get into that system and they set off ransomware. Well, unfortunately for that business, they didn't have good backups. So they ended up having to negotiate with the threat actors and they paid the ransom. Now, here's the unfortunate part. While they were decrypting the data, which can take days to weeks, by the way, number one, you never want to pay the ransom. You always want to ensure that you have good, safe backups. But they got while they were restoring their data, unencrypting it, they got a second ransomware attack. So the encrypted data was now encrypted a second time over. And there is no recovering from that. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that warehouse sits empty today. And it's all because of the negligence of not replacing the computers, the servers, when they were end of life by the software manufacturers. And so if you're letting home users remote into the workforce, you have to make sure that those machines also are A, protected, and B, that they're running the latest updates and you have all of your security tools on those devices. Eric, I think you were talking about a case where somebody had some old hardware or some outdated software. I know, like, if you're still running an on-premise Exchange server, that has to be patched and updated. There's been lots of news reports as of late because Exchange had a vulnerability. If you're not patching that software, you can get in and you can have that system compromised. We had another, it was a prospect. We met with them about IT services. They called us up on a Friday and they said, hey, we have ransomware. We want to sign the agreements. And we're like, hey, hold up. Let's not sign the agreements. Let's figure out what's going on within your environment. And it all was because they had Microsoft Exchange still in their environment. And they found out that the hackers gained access to that machine. They siphoned off the data that they wanted, and then they were able to push out ransomware.
There are instances, Charles, where manufacturing equipment, we have a few manufacturing customers, needs to run on older hardware, even back to Windows 95, Windows 98, because of the way it communicates with the equipment. There are ways, if you must have that, to isolate those devices from the network, and that's required just to keep that access point to the network, that vulnerability, isolated.
And the cyber insurance companies want you to prove that isolation, or at least to have
Absolutely.
you attest to it. Yeah, that's what we've seen too.
Yep.
As Charles mentioned, we have a client, nonprofit, and they actually have a couple of users that remote in RDP, and we have a server farm. That's all, fortunately, very, very much protected. They supply these workers with laptops, but the laptop screen was too small. So this user wanted to keep using their Windows 7 machine, and same, just as Charles said, it not patched, well, certainly not patched from Windows 7, antivirus software that was free and not even up to date. And we are very sure that it's this machine because the FBI actually called the client and said, hey, we see credentials for somebody in your organization, this person that came up in another investigation. And we kind of looked at it and said, well, that's, we thought it was a scam because the 800 number, if you Google it for the FBI, shows up, first thing that shows up, this is a scam. So we did a little bit of due diligence, and we changed passwords on the email address, which is the first most exposed, most at risk in our set. There's two-factor on that, but just in case. And lo and behold, it was actually the RDP password, which was unique and different from the Office 365 email password. So, and we caught the perpetrator, if you will, in the system downloading some malware tools, and the precursors to crypto encrypting the whole server. So good news is we had the tools in the right place at the right time. Bad news is we should have extended or really encouraged / enforced the client to put those tools out into the field, and or said, hey, it's company policy not to use the a Windows 7 machine that's outdated and whatnot. And if you can't do that, you can't have the job. Yeah. Is there a time, I'll say this, Windows 7 is an obvious one. Windows XP, I don't even know where to start with that one. But that being said, what do you guys use? We say machines typically last about 4 to 5 years. I can get 6 years out of a physical server. I mean, the cloud certainly throws some interesting, concepts into that, making things just ongoing forever. But do you guys have are you guys a 4-year shop for returning or for rollovers, or are you less? Can you get 6 years out of it?
It's typically 3 to 5 years, depending on the processing speed, the RAM and stuff of the machine, the configuration of it when we purchase it, and what they're actually doing. Accounting firms take a little bit more, and their software seems to weigh a little bit more each year and weigh down on the machines. And so machines may only last 3 to 4 years there, whereas where they're not doing anything intensive may last 5 to 6 years. The rule of thumb that we keep is we're pretty much a Dell shop. If we can get the Dell extended warranty on it, then we can continue using it as long as the performance is there. If for some reason that it's end of life hardware wise, I don't want a server sitting there running that is going to not be able to get spare parts for. Power supply goes out, motherboard goes out, hard drives out, and you have to outsource and figure out third party where to scavenge for a part on eBay, and you don't know what you're getting. It's time to replace that server. So always check your service tags on your machines and make sure that they're under warranty. If they don't have Dell same day or next day support, it's time to replace those devices.
Yeah, we look at the stool approach, the 3-legged stool. The first one being security. If it can't be secured, it's got to go, and that's usually the operating system expiration. The next one is health. How's it performing? Is the hard drive healthy? Is the memory going to hold up? And there's tools to monitor to see how the health of the system's doing. Is it going to let you down tomorrow? And it's going to take a couple of days to get a new one. And then finally, it's performance. Like Charles said, if it's not doing the job, you wouldn't believe the difference between a computer that moves at the speed of the person versus a person waiting for the computer, what that does to efficiency and performance. So security, health, performance, and then it's time to go if it doesn't meet any one of those. 3 to 6 years, usually good.
Okay, that's about where we fall.
Yep. All right. I see that we do have one question in regards to LastPass. Dawn Marie asked, can you save URL favorites in LastPass? And just like the one that Eric was talking about, you can. It has the website, the URL. It has the ability to click the launch button, which will then open up the URL and log you in. There's also the feature of sharing. So if I need to share that password with someone else within my office, organization, family member, then you can share that password with someone else. I had hired a young lady. She was a YouTuber a couple of years back, and she was going into all of my social media accounts and standardizing on the look and the feel and the naming conventions and all that. And she had access to all of my social media, but she didn't have access to my password. And so she would have to let me know, hey, I'm getting ready to log in. And any of the sites that had 2-factor, I would have to authenticate her on those sites. But she never saw those passwords that were in LastPass because I didn't give her access to see them. But she was able to access all of those on my behalf. And the URLs are there, the logins, so anything that you have, whether it's your healthcare, benefits, or your credit card sites, whatever they may be, all of those URLs are going to be saved inside of LastPass, along with the username and the password that you chose at that time. And the cool thing is, if you have the paid version, if you go in and you have to update your password, it'll say, hey, your password's changed. Do you want to update that in your vault? And then inside the vault, you can look at the password and you can actually visually see what that password is. But if you're like me, I always use the auto-generated password. And so it's a string of characters. I'm not going to remember what it is. I don't care to remember, and I'm definitely not going to retype it. I'm just going to let the LastPass software do what it's supposed to do.
We were doing Christmas shopping, and my wife was sitting on her computer. She's like, "Let me get into your Amazon account." And I was like, "All right, here's the password." And I started rattling off. She was like, "What in the?" I'm like, "Hey, it's 14 characters, randomly generated. I don't know what it is." So.
And when your kids order stuff off of Amazon from your account and you had your credit card saved in there, then you definitely set up two-factor authentication and stop that from ever happening again.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good, you do have to, have a randomly generated password, and a password manager is great, but you do have to remember a single password, at least to get into your computer, to get into your password manager. There's all kinds of ways, typically a phrase or something you're going to remember that has uppercase, lowercase, a special character, numbers. If you've got a cable company and they've given you a temporary password, it's usually something like, the pound sign, maybe an exclamation point, dog with a capital DOG with 3974, and then at the last word will be, vacation with an exclamation point or a number at the end. So, you took your dog on vacation in whatever year, your random number, and those are pretty, if it's 12 characters, those are pretty damn secure passwords.
Do you reckon? So I kind of just memorized 5 of them that have some relation to me, right? And because somebody asked me, do you that master password is now the keys to my kingdom. So aren't you worried about that one? I was like, well, yes and no. No, because I don't really type it anywhere but there. And 2, yes, I'll rotate it every 30, 60 days. And they each make sense to me. And like you said, it's not what was my first pet, where's my first school, who's my oldest cousin. It's other things, right? And you if somebody did get that database, like there's with what was LastPass having some kind of breach, well, there's a good chance that they have an old version. I'm going to change it anyway. So in the time it would take them to decrypt that 12 character, 14 character password, I will have changed it anyway, and they won't have access. So a little bit of hygiene there on my part. And we get asked a lot of, how can I memorize 5 things? I'm like, well, you might not know the license plate on your car, but you know what your car looks like, you know what color it is, where you live, so utilize some of those pieces. But again, it's mental practice. It's good hygiene to say, I just need to memorize 5 things. Get in an index card or 5 index cards, hide them around the house, and hope.
One last thing about passwords is, social media nowadays, it's very easy to share information that you don't mean to share, and you get the secret question, right? Your high school mascot. I'll tell you what, you once I know you give me about 30 minutes and I'll tell you your high school mascot, where you were married, what first car you had. Well, I know a guy in motor vehicle. I'll find out what first car you had, or your parents' maiden name. Lie and document. I don't encourage lying, but when it comes to secret questions, there's no secrets anymore, as long as you've got multiple accounts out there in social media.
Well, one last thing on the passwords, and then we'll go to the Q&A that John sent, is a lot of people think that, I'll replace the E with a 3 and the A with an @
character substitution.
Well, those, yeah. I mean, if you had Apollo 13 as your password, and you're like, oh, let me change that to Apollo 2003, it's not going to matter. The definition, the algorithms, they're going to run through those passwords. A brute force attack is going to guess that easy password in no time at all. So make sure that you're using complex passwords. You're not using random, replacing characters. I mean, you can replace those characters, but make sure that it's not spelling out the word. Don't spell out the word airplane 1, 2, 3 and think that that's secure because you use the @ and an exclamation on the end. It is not going to be secure. With that, John Roberts asked, what are the views of unique vulnerabilities of IoT devices and the best methods and tools to mitigate those risks? But, one of the things I'll say is the vendors used to push out IoT just right as soon as it went, they could get it to market as fast as possible. There's more regulations that are starting to happen to where they have to make those devices more secure. You look at the Ring device, you plug it up on your home, all of a sudden we found out Amazon employees are watching our Ring devices and it has no two-factor authentication. So if I can guess what Eric's Ring login is, I can watch Eric's cameras. And so the IoT manufacturers are actually working at more better securing those devices. And it's not that you want to run a SIM at home, which is a security information event management tool, but a SIM within your business is going to tell you anything that happens within that site. And that's what I highly recommend for our clients. For home devices, it's just like, do you really want to take the risk of having an Amazon Echo or Dot or whatever sitting there, listening in on you, and that smart TV and the smart remotes now, it's like, how much insecurity do you want? The other thing, John, you could do is if you do bring those devices in, you could always segment the network. So your computer device is on one set of IP addresses and your devices, the IoT devices, are all on a separate one. That way you keep your data secure, and that especially works well in a business. And a lot of the switches today, and I really don't want to get technical on this, so call your IT provider, call your computer guy, call your neighbor's kid. They could set up a virtual LAN for you. So it's all plugged into the same configuration of the switch, but they're all the same router, but they're using a different local area network to talk to and communicate to. And you know what? If you can't watch your cameras from your work phone, may not be a bad thing anyways. So you want to keep those IoT devices, especially as there's more and more devices, your refrigerators, your TVs, and everything else is now getting to become a smart device. I mean, even your cat feeder, your fish feeder, all these things, you can now watch your cat eating food, from around the world. So just be careful plugging up any old device onto that. And if you're running a business and you do need to bring in some IoT devices, make sure that you talk to your software provider, your managed service provider, about having a SIEM, SIEM, security information and event management software. It's a tool that is installed on all of your devices that's looking to see what else is on your network. If something new pops up, they'll be able to let you know.
Speaking of on the network, when we bring on a new customer, one of the questions we ask is, how many network devices do you have? Most people think of printers, computers, switches, and things like that, and they give us a count. Then we put in tools to scan the network, and it's most of the time double, sometimes triple. They don't realize what they're plugging into the network. Time clocks, cameras, wireless devices. It's crazy. So any device that you put on the network can compromise the entire network and should be known and secured. And if it can't be, like Charles said, it's got to go on a VLAN, a virtual LAN that segments your business security from the vulnerabilities.
We work with a couple of schools, and we estimate 3 devices per student and 5 devices per teacher. And the administration is actually less; it's 2 to 3. So and that's anything from 1 or 2 iPhones. 1 or 2, an iPhone, an iWatch, a Galaxy, Android, same idea, a tablet of some sort, a Chromebook potentially, and then then the school, whatever the school provides as far as a laptop, and that's just what the kids are carrying around today. And that's all segmented. So now you got a student network, you've got a teacher network, you get an admin network, and they're called VLANs, as Charles alluded to. The hard part is, how do you, because of Internet of Things or IoT devices, you need to carry those VLANs to your home, because you're going to bring I bring a laptop home. I do work at home, and how do I keep that separate from my Nest thermostat, my Ring doorbell? So, call your IT, as Charles said, call an IT provider, call your neighborhood. The neighborhood kids know how to do it. A lot of the off-the-shelf routers, Linksys and D-Link, all those name brands, they'll do some form of VLANs today. So that's the good news. So,
Well, the other thing too, Eric, and you don't have to be technical, you could you could log into the router. It's pretty easy nowadays. Log into the router and you can set up what's called a guest Wi-Fi.
yeah.
And so you have your home Wi-Fi that you're going to connect your laptop to, and then you can connect all your IoT devices to the guest Wi-Fi. And therefore, any friends come over, whatever, you just let them connect to the guest Wi-Fi and not yours. And so therefore, you don't worry about spreading infection with somebody coming in with their infected device.
Right.
And so it's just another way of looking at it, another way of doing it. So there's ways around it, but IoT is definitely one of those things that, it's starting to hit everyone's home and businesses. So make sure that you're looking out for the safeguards there and what you can do to best keep yourself safe from those devices. I don't see any more questions at this time. I think we just have one more slide. All right, so go ahead, Christina.
So we're going to go over a few takeaways. Charles, take it if you'd like.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So just to recap kind of some of the conversations we had today, make sure that you're watching for those phishing emails. Again, if it invokes fear, urgency, personal information, can you go do this errand for me? You might want to raise a flag, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, did you really send this to me? Look to see who it was actually sent from. And like Jeff said, pay attention to the characters of the email address, because a lot of times they can just swap a couple of little characters, and make sure that you're doing your due diligence on that. And if you ever click on a link and it's asking you to put in your authentication, your password, username, and password, definitely back out of that. Call your IT admin or office administrator and say, hey, is this email legit? Number 2 is multi-factor authentication, making sure that you use an app or text messaging. We highly recommend that you use an app today over text messaging, because even texting can be compromised. Your phone can be spoofed and somebody could take over your text messages. So make sure that you're using a multi-factor authentication. There's multiples out there. There's Duo, there's Google Authenticator. Anyways, there's multiple ones that you could utilize. And Authy is another one that I was trying to think of. And then software and hardware updates on your computer. Make sure that software updates are first and foremost installed on your computer. And I really like where Jeff was going with that. Make sure that the software is updated. Make sure that it's secured. And if not, then go ahead and replace the device, especially if it's the high utilization on those devices.
Very true. Those pesky little notifications that come up in the corner of your computer, don't ignore them. Really utilize them, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we do have a few more things. We got your information with the Zoom login. But if you like what you heard today, we really appreciate you coming, spending a little time with all 4 of us, I guess 3 of us. We do have a little bit of information that we can provide for you. We have a newsletter for all 3 of us: Nashville Computer, Summit IT Services, and NorthStar Technology Services. We can go ahead and email you those afterwards. We also have a double-page document with call to action items. Just a personal thing. Yes, I've done it. No, I've done it. This is what I got to do to be more protected. But again, we appreciate you all for coming today. If you gentlemen have any last minute, information that you want to provide, now is the time to speak. Or if you have any questions, please put them in the chat down below. I'm more than happy to answer them.
I got one last thing. As we approach New Year, take inventory of the accounts that you have. Your email is a good place to start. You may not realize how many accounts you have. Document them, eliminate the ones you don't need, less is more, and put the rest in a password manager. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Yeah. My only thing is your Amazon package was not deferred. It most likely will make it on time. You don't have to click anywhere to redirect it and give them your credit card number. I think I've gotten like 6 of those emails already. So Christmas is coming. Enjoy it, everybody. And happy to be a part of this. Thanks, Charles and Jeff and Christina and Sarah's behind the scenes there to setting all this up. Hopefully, it triggers some ideas, whether you use any of us or none of us. It'll give you some good thought to become more secure and make it through the holidays, and Happy New Year too. So thanks.
Yeah. And the last tip that I'd give you is, you're going to get text messages like Eric was talking about. Hey, your FedEx package, click here. Don't click on those links. However, there is one thing that I do personally, and that is I set up all of my credit cards, my bank accounts, anything, any deposits, withdrawals, anything over $1 that's authorized on those cards, it automatically texts so that I know that transaction is happening. So in the event that a credit card is compromised, you can act swiftly to get that card shut down. And so that's my tip, especially now during the holidays. And do what you can to protect yourself, your business, and your kids, and then educate your parents, your grandparents, and everybody, and let them know what you learned today, because it applies to everyone.
Absolutely.
All right, well, if we don't have any more Q&A to answer, we really appreciate you all coming and spending a little time with us. Again, we will pass out our contact information via email, but we look forward to hearing if you do have any questions. Well, thank you guys.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.